referring to one of the most powerful, intelligent, and attractive women of ancient times. We certainly cannot help but mention the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. Known for her intelligence, education, self-control, and great leadership, Cleopatra has become a symbol of female beauty and strength. In particular, with her ability, she captivated the most powerful men of that time. The influence of the Egyptian queen exists not only in the past, but even in the present. Cleopatra is also an abundant and endless source of inspiration for works of art, from literature to music and cinema. So, how did this woman use her talents and live her life? Today, let's discover about Queen Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Women are as influential as these emperors. The Queen of Egypt is not an Egyptian. Egyptian Queen Cleopatra, whose full name is Cleopatra Philopator, born in 69 BC, died in 30 BC, and is Macedonian. She was the last member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a dynasty of Greeks that ruled Egypt and its environs from 305 BC to 30 BC. According to Macedonian history, Cleopatra was a descendant of the Ptolemaic dynasty, born of Ptolemy I, a general of Alexander the Great. After Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, Ptolemy I came to power and ushered in a famous Greek dynasty that lasted for 3 centuries. Although she was not ethnically Egyptian, Cleopatra adopted many of the ancient customs of her country and was the first member of the Ptolemaic family to learn the Egyptian language. The Ptolemaic dynasty considered inbreeding as a normal thing. The 12th Ptolemy king married his sister and gave birth to Cleopatra. And according to family tradition, Cleopatra married her 2 younger brothers. When the 12th Ptolemy's father died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra and her 10-year-old brother Ptolemy XIII married and took over the country. At that time, Cleopatra was only 17 years old. She ruled ancient Egypt from 51 to 30 BCE. Although she was not an Egyptian, Cleopatra was worshipped by the people as a god. Perhaps it is because of her descent from the Ptolemaic era that many people still joke about Cleopatra as the Queen of Egypt, but not a real Egyptian. Cleopatra killed her siblings to monopolize the kingship. In the tradition of the Ptolemaic family, the House of Cleopatra, queens were not allowed to rule alone, but only co-ruled with a man and acted as subordinates to that man. Therefore, when her father died, Cleopatra ascended the throne at the age of 18 and sat on the throne with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. This was also the queen's first husband. Not long after the marriage, Cleopatra and the 13th Ptolemy had a disagreement. A bloody civil war broke out in Egypt. In 49 BC, the 13th Ptolemy overthrew Cleopatra, forcing the queen to flee to Syria. Cleopatra spent a year here, organizing her own army and returning to Egypt. With the help of Caesar, the famous Roman general she seduced, Cleopatra was returned to the throne after the 13th Ptolemy was killed. On official documents, only the name of the queen remains. Even the coins printed with the pharaohs have only Cleopatra's portrait. After the death of King Ptolemy XIII, in order to gain the rightful name on the throne, she had to marry another brother of hers, the 14th Ptolemy, to rule with her. On the surface, the two reigned, but power was in the hands of Cleopatra. However, like the 13th Ptolemy, the 14th Ptolemy was also murdered by Cleopatra to preserve his absolute power. In 44 BCE, Caesaron, son of Cleopatra and Caesar, became co-ruler with his mother, Queen Cleopatra, after the death of Pharaoh Ptolemy XIV. Not only did Cleopatra deal with her 2 brothers, but Cleopatra also considered Arsinoe, her sister, to be a rival to the throne. So in 1941 BCE, Cleopatra assassinated her on the steps of a temple in Rome. Cleopatra did not possess a stunning appearance. Cleopatra is known worldwide for her contributions to the Egyptian Empire and is one of the most powerful queens in recorded human history. But the truth is not so sure. Evidence of her banal beauty is shown in ancient Egyptian coins when the queen's face is engraved on it as a crude face with a lumpy jaw, a hooked nose, and a not so easy expression, bear. It is believed that Cleopatra worked hard to control how the public perceived her, and her image on Egyptian coins was a way to appear more masculine, to emphasize her power and authority. The historian Plutarch once wrote, "Cleopatra possessed an ordinary beauty, and her beauty was not too outstanding." However, he also added that, instead of her unremarkable beauty, Cleopatra possessed great intelligence, with charm and sweetness in her voice, which could fascinate others. Stronger than external beauty. It can be seen that most of the bad reputation of the Egyptian queen for seduction and physical attractiveness was created by her enemies. Roman historians even describe Cleopatra as a prostitute who used sex to seduce powerful men into giving her power. Cleopatra was a very intelligent and shrewd woman. Although the Romans referred to Cleopatra as a lecherous, depraved woman, often using her beauty as a political weapon. But perhaps she is more famous for her superior intelligence than her beauty. Cleopatra knew more than 9 languages and was educated in mathematics, philosophy, rhetoric, and astronomy. She was described by Egyptian folklore as a ruler who knew how to elevate and appreciate the scholarly world. Historian Alberto Angela says that Cleopatra loved Homer and was able to recite large portions of his work. Every aspect of the library was familiar to Cleopatra. Scholars and librarians may know her well, and perhaps sometimes forget that it was the queen in front of them. Historians say Cleopatra received a higher level of education than her contemporaries from a young age. This made her more independent and strong. Despite the criticism she faced for being a woman, Cleopatra continued to demonstrate important actions in her leadership role. With her intelligence, sharpness, Cleopatra became one of the most respected and admired leaders in the history of the world. During her reign, Cleopatra showed exquisite communication skills and exceptional diplomatic skills. Over time, her talent earned her the respect of the people of the Egyptian Empire. Because of her great contributions in nation building, the people also consider Cleopatra to be one of Egypt's most successful queens. In addition to her political talent, Cleopatra was also an eminent scholar. Many historians have pointed out that she was a good thinker and was able to discuss philosophical ideas. They also considered Cleopatra a gifted chemist who founded a perfumery factory to support her political strides. Not only philosophy, Cleopatra also studied mathematics and astronomy. Several documents describe her as a leader, highlighting the rank as well as the role of other scholars of her time. Because of Cleopatra's intelligence, many high-ranking scholars often enjoyed spending time discussing with her. It can be seen that, although she may not have a beautiful appearance, we cannot deny the intellectual talent that this Egyptian queen possesses. Who did Cleopatra really love? Caesar and Cleopatra also hails a secret Egyptian wedding. This marriage was not recognized in Rome because Caesar was a married man and broke the law by marrying a foreign woman. Not long after, Caesar was on his way back to Rome. Cleopatra's seat of power was not quite as sturdy as Cleopatra thought. She was forced to depend on the Roman Empire. A year after giving birth to Caesarion, the son of Caesar and her, the queen took him out of Egypt and landed in Rome. Here, she was deeply loved by Caesar. He even built a statue of her on the Temple of Venus Genetrix, despite the people's objections. However, happiness did not last long. Caesar was assassinated. Cleopatra failed to make Caesarion Roman emperor. The mother and the son immediately returned to Egypt. It can be seen that the love story of Cleopatra and Caesar is actually based entirely on personal factors, self-interest, not love. Not long after the death of the Roman emperor, Queen Cleopatra fell in love with Mark Antony, a general of Rome, and made the relationship public. Having fallen in love with the beautiful queen before, after the emperor died, Antony tried everything to conquer her. He invited Cleopatra to leave for Taurus to negotiate the Roman Emperor Caesar's previous military supply. The meeting took place on a splendid boat surrounded by lavish equipment and countless beauties. Of course, there was also the woman he always missed. Cleopatra's beauty and intelligence, sharpness, and sweet voice completely captivated Antony's heart, making him decide to leave his wife to follow his heart's call and move to Alexandria, the place of his queen. Since then, the talented general and the powerful queen of Egypt spent happy days together. Cleopatra not only captivated Antony, but also made him more steadfast. Together, they ruled the mighty kingdom without being blinded by love. However, this peaceful time did not last long. Augustus, Octavia's brother, Antony's ex-wife, was determined to break that strong relationship. On the one hand, he infuriated the Romans by Antony's behavior. On the other hand, he persuaded the parliament to turn against the Egyptians. War between the two kingdoms broke out, and Cleopatra could not resist a powerful attack from Rome. As for Antony, he decided to give up his throne in Rome to go to the queen. According to many records, Cleopatra accidentally pushed it to death when she wanted to test him. After the Egyptian army failed, she told her people to inform Antony that she was dead. Heartbroken, Antony immediately committed suicide by stabbing him in the stomach with a sword. From then until her death, Queen Cleopatra could not help but regret the death of her lover. Some theories suggest that she lived in torment and committed suicide a week later, but there are theories that Cleopatra was poisoned. However, the love of Cleopatra and Mark Antony touched many people. Even Augustus, who started the war of that time to break the two's relationship, admired their love for each other. Later, he built two tombs of the Queen and Mark Antony next to each other so that they could be together forever. Cleopatra always knew how to use tricks to achieve her desires. Cleopatra believed herself to be a living saint and often used her clever acting to woo potential allies and strengthen her divine status. An outstanding example of this talent of hers was in 48 BCE, when Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria at a time when the feud between her and her brother Ptolemy XIII was running high. Knowing that her encounter with the Roman general would be hindered by Ptolemy's forces, Cleopatra had her wrapped in a carpet. It is said that she was wrapped in a cloth bag and secretly moved to Caesar. He was stunned by the image of a beautiful young queen, and the two soon became allies and lovers. Cleopatra later also used this tactic when meeting Mark Antony. It is said that when summoned to meet her general, she arrived on a golden raft decorated with purple sails and silver oars. She herself was decorated to resemble the river god Aphrodite, sitting under a gilded roof, while servants stood around holding fans for her and dressed as Cupid. Antony, who claimed to be the embodiment of the Egyptian god Dionysus, was immediately enchanted. Cleopatra was living in Rome at the time of Caesar's assassination. Cleopatra traveled to Rome with Julius Caesar as early as 46 BC, and her presence was met with much opposition. Caesar did not hesitate to publicize that she was his lover. Even when she arrived in Rome, Cleopatra brought her beloved son on a rickshaw. When Caesar erected a gilded statue of Cleopatra at the Temple of Venus Genetics, many Romans protested. The Queen of Egypt, after Caesar's death in 44 BC, was forced to leave Rome, but she still left her mark in this city. Her distinctive hairstyle and pearl jewelry became fashionable here, and according to historian Joanne Fletcher, many of the women of Rome imitated Cleopatra's style so much that their images are frequently mistaken for the original Cleopatra. Cleopatra's death may not have been due to a venomous snake bite. Cleopatra and Antony ended their lives in 30 BC after being driven to Alexandria by Octavian's army. While Antony is said to have stabbed himself in the stomach, how Cleopatra committed suicide remains questionable. Bite of an Egyptian cobra on her hand. But the ancient chronicler Plutarch insists that no one really knows what happened. He suggested that Cleopatra may also have drunk poison hidden in her calm, and historian Strabo writes that the queen may have taken a deadly drug. Many scholars today suspect that she used a needle impregnated with a powerful poison, possibly snake venom or something similar. Cleopatra was probably buried with Mark Antony. According to the book, before her death, Queen Cleopatra visited Antony's grave and cried. Since he died, her life had no meaning. But in reality, that doesn't seem to be the case. Because in truth, she had no love for the general Antony, nor any feelings for the Roman Emperor Caesar. Connecting her life with these two men, her ultimate goal is only to keep the peace of Egypt, the great love of her life. However, according to the judgment of Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass, after her death, Cleopatra was buried with Antony by Augustus. He also said that through Roman literature, it can be seen that Antony wanted to be buried in Egypt after his death. As for Cleopatra, When she was alive, she built a double tomb. When the two died, Augustus, Antony's cousin, helped them fulfill their wishes. Above are some information you may not know about the ancient Egyptian queen. While there is still much about Cleopatra that remains unclear, we cannot deny that despite her death more than 2,000 years ago, she is still one of the most attractive women in history. Famous for her beauty and wisdom, the Queen of Egypt has become an inspiration many women in their journey to build, develop, and strengthen their status. Thereby, it also helps them become more confident and steady in life.